My mum tried to force me to marry her best friend's daughter, then got furious when I eloped with my girlfriend instead. So here's something I never thought I'd say. My mom has been planning my wedding since I was a kid. Not in a dreaming of the day her child gets married kind of way. No, she literally planned who I would marry, when, and how. The craziest part? She didn't think I needed to know about it until recently. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and until about a month ago, I thought I was living a pretty normal life. I have a decent job, a small but close friend group, and a girlfriend, Sarah, who I've been dating for about 2 years. Sarah's amazing, kind, smart, funny, and honestly way out of my league. I've been keeping the relationship low-key because, well, my mom's always been, let's call it intense. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what she dropped on me last month. It all started during a random family dinner. My mom, dad, and I were sitting at the table eating. Like usual, when out of nowhere my mom says, "Oh, by the way, we should start planning the wedding soon." I almost choked on my food. At first, I thought she was joking. Sarah and I hadn't even talked about marriage yet, so I laughed and said, "What wedding?" Mom looked at me like I was the crazy one. "Your wedding, of course," she said, all matter of fact. "You're not getting any younger. And Emma's family has been asking when we'll make things official." Emma. The name didn't even register at first. Then it hit me. Emma is the daughter of my mom's best friend. I hadn't seen her in over a decade, maybe more. As kids, we had been forced to hang out during family get-togethers, but we were never close. I honestly barely remember what she looks like. I stared at my mum, waiting for her to laugh or say, "Just kidding." But she didn't. She just kept eating, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You're serious?" I finally asked. Mum looked up, confused. "Of course I'm serious. We've been planning this since you were little. You're not going to find a better match than Emma. Her family is well respected. They're successful, and she's a good girl. Trust me, this is for the best." I didn't even know what to say. Planning this since I was little? What does that even mean? How could I not have known about this? Turns out when I was about 10 years old, my mom and her best friend made some kind of pact that their kids would get married someday. According to my mum, it was a brilliant idea to merge our families. Emma's family is wealthy, and my mom thought this marriage would secure the future for both sides. Let me be clear, I had no idea this was happening. Nobody asked me, nobody told me. My entire life, my mom has been pushing me to be the perfect son, get good grades, go to a good college, get a good job. But I always thought that was just normal parental pressure. I had no clue she was grooming me to marry someone I barely know. The more she talked about it, the more surreal it felt. She had everything planned out. She had already decided the venue, the guest list, even the color scheme. She said Emma and I were destined to be together, and it was time to fulfill our family's legacy. I just sat there, stunned. My dad stayed completely silent through the whole conversation, which didn't surprise me. He's always been the quiet type, just going along with whatever Mom says. But I couldn't let it go. "What if I don't want to marry Emma?" I asked. Mom's face hardened. "Don't be selfish," she said. "This is bigger than you. It's about the family." Over the next few days, Mom kept bringing it up, dropping little comments like, "Emma's parents are so excited," or "You'll thank me for this someday." When I tried to push back, she pulled out every guilt trip in the book. "You don't understand how much we've sacrificed for you," she'd say. "This is the least you can do for us. You think Sarah's going to give you the kind of future Emma can. Be realistic. You're going to break Emma's heart. She's been waiting for this her whole life." That last one really got to me. I started wondering, had Emma known about this all along? Did she actually want this? Was I the bad guy for wanting to blow it all up? Then a week later, my mum dropped another bombshell. She'd invited Emma and her parents over for dinner so we could break the good news. The night of the dinner, I was a nervous wreck. I felt like I was walking into a trap. Sarah didn't know anything about what was going on, and I didn't know how to tell her. She knew my mum was controlling, but this was on a whole new level. When Emma and her family arrived, it was awkward right from the start. Emma looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. She was polite but distant, like she was just going through the motions. Her parents, on the other hand, were beaming. It was like they thought the deal was already sealed. During dinner, Mum started talking about the future again, dropping hints about wedding dates and venues. I couldn't take it anymore. I finally blurted out, "I don't think this is going to work." The room went dead silent. Emma looked relieved, but her mom's face fell. My mom, though, she was furious. She started ranting about how ungrateful I was, how I was throwing away everything she'd worked for. She even accused me of being brainwashed by Sarah. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, Sarah called. My phone was on the table and Mom saw her name on the screen. She grabbed my phone and answered it before I could stop her. "He's busy," she said coldly and hung up. That night, I finally realized there was no reasoning with my mom. She didn't care about what I wanted. This wasn't about me. It was about her and this weird fantasy she'd been building for years. After everyone left, I told my dad I was done. I wasn't going to marry Emma, and I wasn't going to let Mum control my life anymore. He didn't say much, just nodded and said, "Do what you need to do." I spent the rest of the night with Sarah, trying to figure out our next move. That's when I made the decision. I was going to propose to Sarah. If my mom wanted a wedding so badly, she was about to get one, but it wouldn't be the one she planned. I kept it simple, a private moment in the park where we had our first date. Sarah was over the moon, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But that relief didn't last long. I knew I had to tell my mom, and I dreaded every second leading up to it. When I broke the news, it went about as well as you'd expect. Mom completely lost it. She accused me of being selfish, of throwing away everything she'd worked for, of disrespecting the family. She called Sarah manipulative and even implied that Sarah was only with me for money, which is hilarious because I'm not exactly rolling in cash. It wasn't just anger though. There was something else, fear. Like she was terrified of losing control over me. She ended the conversation with a threat. "You'll regret this. I promise you'll regret this." I should have taken that more seriously. At first, it was small things. Mom stopped talking to me altogether, which was honestly a relief. But then she started calling other family members. My aunt, my uncle, even my cousins, telling them I was abandoning the family and making a huge mistake. Suddenly, I was getting texts and calls from people I hadn't spoken to in months, all telling me to reconsider and think about what Mom's done for me. Then it escalated. Sarah started noticing weird things happening at work. She's a teacher, and out of nowhere, her principal called her into the office to ask about some complaints they'd received from parents. The complaints were vague and didn't make sense. Things like, "She's unprofessional," or "She's not fit to work with kids." Sarah's been teaching for years and has never had an issue, so this came out of nowhere. We started connecting the dots. When one of her co-workers let it slip that the complaints had been anonymous, but the language sounded suspiciously like something my mom would say, I confronted Mum about it, and she flat out denied it. But I didn't believe her for a second. By this point, Sarah and I had had enough. We decided to elope. We didn't want the drama of a big wedding, and honestly, we just wanted to start our lives together without my mom breathing down our necks. We planned a small courthouse ceremony with just a couple of friends as witnesses. The day of the ceremony, everything was perfect, for about 10 minutes. Right as we were about to start, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin. "Your mum knows. Run!" I didn't have time to process what that meant before the doors to the courthouse flew open. My mum stormed in, followed by Emma and her parents. It felt like something out of a bad soap opera. Mom was screaming about how I was making the biggest mistake of my life, how Sarah was a homewrecker, and how I was throwing away my future. Emma's mom was crying, begging me to reconsider, and Emma looked just as horrified as I felt. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to yell back, to tell Mom to leave and never come back. But another part of me, the part she'd been controlling my whole life, froze. I felt like a kid again, scared to stand up to her. That's when Sarah stepped in. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't yell. She just calmly said, "We're here because we love each other, and no one, not you, not anyone, is going to take that away from us." For the first time, I saw fear in my mom's eyes. Not anger, not control, fear. She realized she couldn't win. Then out of nowhere, Emma spoke up. She'd been quiet the whole time, letting her mom and mine do all the talking. But now she looked directly at me and said, "I don't want this either. I've never wanted this." The room went silent. Even my mom stopped mid-rant. Emma turned to her mom and said, "I've been dating someone for the past year, and I'm not giving him up for this. I'm sorry, but I'm done." Emma, the person my mom had been holding up as the perfect match, had been secretly going through the same thing I was, and she was just as trapped. For a moment, I felt this weird sense of solidarity with her, like we were both trying to escape the same nightmare. Emma's mom started crying even harder, and my mom, well, she just stood there, stunned. She didn't say another word. She just turned around and walked out. You'd think that would have been the end of it. But no, my mom doesn't give up that easily. Over the next few days, she went nuclear. She cut me off financially. Not that I needed her money, but it was still a slap in the face. She told the rest of the family that I'd humiliated her and destroyed our relationship. Some of them sided with her. Others didn't. It caused a huge rift in the family that I'm not sure will ever fully heal. As for Sarah and me, we went ahead with the courthouse wedding a week later. and it was perfect. No drama, no interruptions. Just us and the people who actually supported us. Emma reached out a few days after the ceremony to apologize for her part in everything. She told me she'd finally told her boyfriend about the whole arranged marriage situation, and they were working through it together. I told her I didn't blame her for any of it. We were both victims of our parents' insane obsession with control. Final update. After the courthouse wedding, I thought I'd finally bought myself some peace. My mom didn't show up or call to ruin it, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe she'd just given up. She didn't reach out after the wedding, but instead of relief, it felt like the calm before the storm. A week later, the fallout began. First, I found out she'd been calling every single family member she could think of, spinning some wild narrative about how I'd abandoned the family and how Sarah was manipulating me. I got texts and calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, some sympathetic, others furious. But then she escalated. One day, Sarah came home from work absolutely shaken. Apparently, someone had called her school claiming she was emotionally unstable and accusing her of being inappropriate with students. The school took it seriously enough to pull her aside and investigate. Sarah was heartbroken. She's an incredible teacher and has never had a single complaint in her career. We both knew exactly who was behind it. I called my mom and demanded an explanation. She didn't deny it. She said, "I did what I had to do. You'll see one day that I'm right." That was the moment something in me snapped. For years, I'd let her guilt trips and manipulations control me. I'd always been the good son, trying to please her, trying to keep the peace. But this was unforgivable. Sarah and I decided we couldn't just let this go. If my mom was willing to stoop this low, who knew what else she was capable of? Sarah suggested we take a closer look at the whole arranged marriage situation. Something about it had never sat right with me. Why was my mom so obsessed with this idea of me marrying Emma? It felt bigger than just family legacy. So I started digging. I went through old family records, financial documents, anything I could get my hands on. At first, it was just grasping at straws. But then I found something that changed everything. Buried in a stack of old papers in my dad's office, I found a contract, an actual signed agreement between my mom and Emma's parents. It wasn't just a pact, like my mom had made it sound. It was a full-blown financial arrangement. Emma's family had agreed to pay my mom a substantial amount of money if the marriage went through. In exchange, my mom promised to ensure the wedding happened by any means necessary. I stared at the paper, my hand shaking. This wasn't about love, legacy, or family. This was about greed. My mom had been trying to sell me off like some kind of business transaction. And the worst part, she didn't even think I deserved to know. Armed with the contract, I confronted my dad first. I showed him the document and asked if he knew anything about it. He looked horrified. He admitted he'd heard my mom and Emma's parents talking about securing the future, but he had no idea it was this serious. He begged me not to make it public, saying it would tear the family apart. But I couldn't let it go. My mom had already tried to ruin Sarah's career. She'd turned half the family against me. She needed to be held accountable. So I called a family meeting. I invited everyone, my aunts, uncles, cousins, even Emma's family. My mom was there too, smug as ever, probably thinking I was about to apologize and grovel for forgiveness. She had no idea what was coming. When everyone was seated, I pulled out the contract and read it aloud. Emma's parents looked mortified. My mum's face went pale. I laid it all out. The financial agreement, the years of manipulation, the fact that she'd been willing to destroy my life for money. And then I told them about how she'd tried to sabotage Sarah's career, how far she was willing to go to get her way. By the time I finished, the room was in chaos. Emma's mom started yelling at my mom, accusing her of ruining everything. My aunts and uncles were demanding answers. My mom tried to deny it, but the contract was right there in black and white. There was no escaping it. That was the last time I saw my mom. She stormed out of the meeting, and as far as I know, she hasn't spoken to anyone in the family since. A few relatives tried to play peacemaker, saying I should reach out and try to mend things, but I'm done. I spent my whole life trying to please her, and it got me nothing but pain. As for Emma, she reached out a few days later to thank me. She said my mom had been pressuring her just as much as hers had pressured me, and now she finally felt free. She and her boyfriend are still together, and she's working on setting boundaries with her parents. Sarah and I are doing great. She got through the investigation at work, and her school ended up apologizing for even entertaining the complaints. We've started building a life together, far away from my mum's influence. It's not always easy. Cutting ties with family never is. But for the first time, I feel like I'm living my life for me.